Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. Every other year, the college puts on a program called One Book, One Campus, One Community, Read. My guests today are authorities on that program. They are Gail Robinson-Butler, Director of the Clemens Center, and Tammy Thompson, Public Relations Coordinator. The book this year is called The Orphan Train. What is an orphan train?
An orphan train is something that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where abandoned orphaned children were put on trains in big cities and urban areas and brought to the Midwest area by train, and they were adopted. They were shown on the depots, and people were there just for that. It was advertised to come and pick out a child. By signing one document, I believe, that child went home with that family.
And there was something like 200,000 between 1850s and 1929.
Over about a 75-year period.
So the book is called The Orphan Train. It's by Christina Baker Kline. I judge it's a bestseller, or certainly a very popular book. It's fiction, but based on this historical event.
That is correct. And what we have learned, actually a lot of the information that I have came after the book was selected and during the selection process. But the Orphan Train actually came through Paducah. It did not make a stop in Paducah, but the rate was on the rails and it stopped in some of the depots around it. There is a national orphan train complex in Concordia, Kansas, and according to their statistics, 1 out of every 25 Americans is somehow related or connected to an orphan train rider.
Wow.
Which is what those children were called.
Wow.
And as you and I were talking about earlier, some of the children, and in fact the subject of this book, were immigrants, lost their families due to illness, due to lots of different reasons. Sometimes they were told their families were dead and they were not. And they ended up on the train as well. So it's a really interesting book.
Well, and some of them, you know, the families were rather large. And if one of the mother or the father got sick, or if the father, you know, passed away and the mother was trying to raise them on her own, then she had to choose between maybe the younger child or the older child and who to keep and who to, you know, send on the orphan trains.
What a horrible choice. Try to imagine that. Which one of my kids do I send away?
Really.
It's just heart-wrenching.
Many of the stories are heart-wrenching, but the really wonderful part about it is even though the children, not only in being taken from everything that they had known and put on a train with strangers, their lives were not idyllic after they were adopted in many cases.
Right, right.
And it was, you know, anywhere from infants to teenagers, so there was that wide range of ages for those children. And so many of the older children on the trains were in charge of taking care of the babies and bonding with them, and then having, you know, them taken away from them again when they were, you know, adopted, and they weren't even adopted. You know, it was kind of, we're taking you home and you're going to do, you know, what we need you to do, whether it's a farmhand or
basically
whether it's
an
sewing.
unpaid laborer.
Right.
In many situations it was.
Right.
The subject of our book, Orphan Train by Christina Baker Kline, actually went through 2 homes before she ended up in her final home until she aged out of foster care.
Tell us a little bit about the program, how it got started and how it works. How do you choose a book? Because there are a lot of books out there.
There are a lot of books out there, and fortunately we recognized early on that in order to have a successful read and in order for our students at West Kentucky Community and Technical College to read that book, this has to be faculty driven, the choice of the book. So our faculty is intricately involved in the selection of the book. The process starts with Kim Russell and Kevin Garricky and Sherry Anderson and several other people who start about on that selection process. I'm on that committee as well, as I chair the One Book Committee. But it has to be faculty driven. So the selection of the book starts with them, and then we take it to the committee, and we all end up, looking at reading the book. Tammy and I look at things that sometimes the faculty don't look at. How are we going to get people to come? Are people going to be interested in reading this book? Because we want it to extend past the campus gates and to become a community project every other year. And this is our fourth one. So we develop community partners. We have community partners that we work with on every One Book Read since the beginning One Book, which was with Homer Hickam 8 years ago.
I remember that one.
Right, and that was a great experience. Since then, we've done David Baldacci with Wish You Well, which is not a mystery or a detective novel, and then our last one was Jeanette Walls with Half Broke Horses, and now this year we have Orphan Train by Christina Baker Kline. So the authors actually are the finale of the event. So Christina Baker Kline will be on our campus on March 31st and again on April 1st. And she'll be doing a reception, a meet and greet, a question and answer session, and she'll do a public presentation, and followed by a book signing on the Tuesday evening. And then on Wednesday, April 1st, she'll do an 11 a.m. presentation for students here at the college as well as high school students.
Do you know how she came to write this book? Obviously, she had to research it first and then write it, but do you know how she came to write it?
I do not. I will give you an answer that I would give if I were in a classroom and say, but I'll do my best to find out for you.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, it won't be here today. So I do not. But what I can tell you about the book is it shows a great deal of insight into the foster care system. It's told in past, present narrative. The voice of the book is not really the young woman that is the principal character in the book, Neve. It is Molly. And it is written as she were in 2011. And she has been in foster care and is now in trouble of going to juvie because she's had run-ins with several of the families that she's lived with, which I don't think is really unusual many times when teenagers are put into foster care. It doesn't have to be that way, but they don't seem to think they have any choice in the matter. And so the joining and the relationship that becomes between this young woman, Molly, who is in the present day, and the 91-year-old Vivian, who was Neve when she came over, but when she left on the Orphan Train, her name was changed. In fact, her name was changed
several
twice.
times, yes,
Right.
several times.
Depending on what family.
What family took her decided that they didn't want to call her Neve because it was an Irish name, and they were looked down upon.
Oh, right.
And they did not want, she was a bright red-headed young child, and they wanted to kind of disguise that in any way that they could, and one way was to change her name. So
And
she
to really slick her hair back every time that she had to go on the platform at the depot.
Because when they went on the platform, they had to perform. That's what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to perform in a way and act in a way that would make someone want them. And Neve was, an older child. And so they didn't always want the older children. So, unless it was for some type of labor. So, they changed her name, and she became somebody different each time that she went someplace and kind of lost her way. And the fact that she and Molly are together, they find themselves again. Molly finds out who she is and who she can be through who Neve or Vivian was, and who she, faces her past and moves on to the, her future. So they combine together and find out that they have a lot more in common, even though their age difference.
And I think it's kind of a principle that's in many books, that young teaches old, old teaches young, and that the young people are sometimes there to help the elderly people come to peace with what has been in their life. And that happens in this book.
Well, it's all about, Molly is young and has all the technology to find...
And all the rebelliousness.
Yes, to find what happened in the past that Vivian was trying to bury, and tries to, through technology, help her find that past, through the internet and through Facebook and all those things that Vivian knew nothing about and had no idea that there was a possibility for her to find part of her past.
And her family.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating topic, and I would suggest, I mean, I taught history for 24 years. This is not a well-known topic.
No.
At all. When you talk about the immigrant experience, it's you're arriving at Ellis Island or someplace, and you move into an immigrant neighborhood, or you go across the country, or whatever you do. But the idea of the train itself is absolutely fascinating.
Well, I think not only is it fascinating, I think in today's world, we would be going, what?
Yeah,
What
well,
do you do? You know,
absolutely.
I mean, it was
that would be my reaction. It's like, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they pretty much, in many situations, it would have been impossible for the people who were responsible. There were two people in this book, and it is fiction, but, you know, it would be impossible to know what kind of family they were really sending that child home with.
And sometimes what was even more bothersome to me is that even when things were not idyllic, as Gail said, and far past that in bad situations, that they didn't have a choice sometimes but to send them back. There was no other
Right.
place for them to go. And so sometimes I think of my own children. I think if I had to make those choices that some of those parents had to make, and the thought that your child was sent, you just hope for the best, and you hope that they would get a good family. Some did. But for those that didn't and know that they had to be sent back over and over again to bad homes, it's just like being, I don't know, abused over and over again
Right.
in the system. And you just, as Vivian did, she just kind of would block out parts of that, and just move on to the next place and try to figure out who she was going to be next, and how she was going to survive.
And I think that you see that more dramatically in Molly's story, who's telling the story. So it's all about the relationship that these two women have with other people individually, but it's really about the relationship that they forged between themselves and how they helped each other. Because Vivian really changed Molly's life too,
Yes.
because she's been around 91 years and she was very smart, and so it was a give and a take, and a
You think
learning.
about the shock of all of this to begin with. Today, if you say you're from Europe, from France, Germany, Great Britain, you can go to Chicago or New York and get on a plane, and you're in Europe in 6 hours, 8 hours, get on a train, you're home. But in the 1840s, when you're leaving Ireland as a result of the potato famine or whatever, it's a complete divorce from everything you've known. So you think about, even if your parents are alive, you get on the ship, you come to New York or some eastern port, and you're in this strange foreign land, and then your parents end up dying or you're separated, and now they put you, a little kid, on a train to be sent to the middle of some place, not knowing anything of it. The psychological impact of that. Does she explore that in the book, the psychological impact of the separation,
To a degree.
Yeah.
I think she explores more the relationships that she makes with the other kids on the train. And she thinks back about her parents, and especially her sisters.
I think that when she's, in the times in the book when she's alone, when she thinks back, and particularly in the beginning when she's separated from her family, they die tragically, and she's ripped out of everything that she's known. And just
Right.
like you said, she was already ripped from what she'd known in Ireland. But she had her parents and her brother and her sister. She had that, that closeness of her family. And then when she was ripped from that, I think that she delves into it, to the fact that when she's alone, she thinks, who am I? Who am I? Not just
course.
where am I and what am I doing, but who am I now?
And the only thing she can do for survival is to be what the family wants her to be.
Whatever that is, she has to become that. And it's not the young Irish girl. It's somebody else entirely, and it changes every time that she has to change families.
And when Tammy referred to the age of the older children, they weren't really all that old.
Right.
She was 12, right?
She, at the end, she was anywhere from 9 to 14. So and I have a 13-year-old and a 19-year-old, and even I think how would they even cope with that?
I'm
I
sitting here
have
trying to
no
think
idea.
how I would cope with
Me
that,
too.
and I'm
Me
afraid
too.
I'm probably not very well.
As an adult,
Right.
not very well.
Right.
But they really didn't have a choice. It was what they
Sink
were
or swim.
taken. Right.
That's right.
Now the choice was to run away. and we meet other children through her in the book.
But there again,
that become
runaway
important.
to where?
Well,
Where?
runaway to nothing.
Yeah,
You know, there's not a good runaway to.
right, exactly.
But in the course of this, Neve becomes, Vivian and does find a good family eventually, and they help her to make a life, to go to college, to make a life for herself, and that's how she becomes kind of this well-to-do older woman that Molly sees and meets, because she's supposed to help her clean out her attic. She's supposed to help her clean out her attic and get all of her affairs in order. And when they go up in the attic and they are going through her past, that's when the story starts to unfold.
Well, that's good. I like that. It's a good way.
To
And then
unfold.
Molly writes the story for a class project, and then she becomes really excited about the prospects of finding Vivian's parents.
This sort of
because her
strikes
own
me
family.
similar to the book Flags of Our Fathers, where this fellow's going back trying to figure what his dad did in World War II, finds this medal and starts connecting. That's a really good, it's a good storyline to do it. But you're getting about this name change thing. You think about how our names, they're our identity.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, I've got to change my name to suit you.
Well, and the first name she was given to her by a family, the woman in the family who really didn't like her, and it was Dorothy. Well, that's about as far from Neve as you're going to get, and it was really just because she didn't want, as Tammy said, to call her that, to call her Neve. She
To
wanted
have
her be
anything to do with her
Dorothy.
Irish background.
What is her born name?
Neve.
Neve. Her last name is Neve.
Her first name is Neve.
Right. Well, what is her surname?
We don't know that.
They don't know. Huh.
We may know that.
We may know that.
Yes.
We should know that. I bet if we asked.
But no, again, having to change your name to suit the whims of someone else.
Well, she became Dorothy and became a seamstress and had to learn how to sew, because that's kind of what their business was. Their business was sewing.
They're indentured servants is what this
Neve Power. Was her name.
Power. That's a very Irish name. Yeah.
Neve Power.
But I mean, the way you're describing them, they're indentured servants.
Yes. Well, and then the Great Depression hit when she was with this family, and then she went to the family that was the worst of the families that she had. She was abused there, and had to run away and
Physically abused.
Physically abused. And when she was lucky enough, they were supposed to send you to school. The first home when she was Dorothy, they didn't send her to school because they wanted her to sew, and they wanted her to do and make money for them. Then when the Great Depression hit, the first one they got rid of was her. And then she, goes to a home and is abused and runs away, and is lucky enough that a teacher takes her in.
It's a horrible home.
It is a horrible home.
Poverty,
horrible.
dirty.
Holes in the wall, the whole children, and the mother keeps having children, and she suffers Great Depression and is never and she becomes the mother of these children that she knows nothing about, and
There's one scene where they all get hair lice.
Yes.
So she and the father actually take a straight razor and shave all of the children's hair off, and
cut hers very, very short, and which is another, stab to her, because it's her hair, and it's kind of who she is, and that bright red hair, and they cut it all off, to get rid of the lice, and she has to. It's just another.
Well, this program. Was it centrally run? I mean, was it government supervised? I mean, how did this work? Let's say, for example,
he's
Neve.
going to ask us all these historical.
Well, there
that's
were
my
two.
background.
There were
But I
two.
mean, you think about, okay, here you've got Neve Power, and she's suddenly an orphan in what, New York?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, now what happens to Neve next? I mean, who does this program? Who decides?
There was a Children's Aid Society.
There were
that's
two.
right.
There was a Children Aid Society, which is the focus of this book, and then there was the New York Founding Hospital, a Catholic organization. So there were two organizations that kind of
So these are
ran.
private charities, basically?
The way I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
And they
Not
had
for profit status,
Right.
if there was such a thing then, and probably not.
And they
but-
had representatives that went on the train, and it was kind of their job to go from place to place to help these children.
Right.
Which, if you're abandoned, you have nobody. At least you had a chance to get a good home, and that was their job. They went on.
The perspective of parents, if you will, were they screened?
No.
Oh.
No.
They showed up at the depot platform.
So this guy could be a
It was-
drunken wife
Yes.
abuser.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
he can have one of the kids.
Yes.
I mean, there was one of the characters
yes.
in the book that's beaten.
One of the characters, the young man that she meets, Dutchy, who we believe is of German
German
descent.
descent.
Oh, undoubtedly, because that's funny. You know, the Pennsylvania Dutch are actually Germans,
Mm-hmm.
but we Americans couldn't pronounce Deutsch, so they became Dutch. Yeah, that's very typical.
And
yeah.
she called him Dutchy, and he, you know, they develop a relationship as well, and a friendship. And the very short time that they were on, but you know, each stop that they went, they were older, so they were the ones that were not taken. But I can't even remember what I was going to say, but how Dutchy was.
He was abused.
Oh, that's
he was
right.
whipped.
He was on a
because-
farm, and that was his job. His job was to run the farm, and if he didn't, he was beaten.
And so he ran away, and you know, once you started to, and there were children's aids representatives in these small communities or areas where the children were located. And sometimes those people were called in, but it was clear that, and I'm speaking from this book standpoint,
Yes.
not a historical standpoint. I forget who I'm talking to here. Just published his own history book, so I have to be a little bit more this book.
This book, yes, the story.
But no, I'm sure that what she did, I would bet, and I'd love to
Oh,
ask
I'm
her,
sure.
maybe I can when she
Well,
comes
you
in
can.
the spring, that I'm sure she did researches.
Yes, she
but
did.
I'm fascinated as to why she chose this topic. Again, this is not well known in the historical
isn't.
community or
And-
anyone
And
else.
what we found out, Barry, is in talking about this book and promoting this book, is many people have never heard of the Orphan Trains.
Oh, I totally agree.
And for a long time, it was pushed under the rug.
Right.
They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't
I
want to talk about
can see
what
why.
was done. So,
Yeah.
but many
Yeah.
people today have never heard about them.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important that we do shows like this and
Absolutely.
we talk about it, because it did happen.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It did
Yeah,
happen, and
yeah.
like Gail said, 1 in 25 have some connection
Some
with
connection.
with the
Well,
orphan.
how did
trains.
you all discover that this orphan trains would come through Paducah?
Actually, Mary Hammond at the Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau knew that fact about the orphan train, and once she learned that we had picked the book, because we also not only ask schools to read it, but we also ask book clubs to read it. We have reading discussion books, or reading discussion groups about the particular book. So Mary knew that, and she told us about it, and then
Well, it makes you wonder, when did they come out and serve meals, refreshments when the trains got here? What did they do? I mean, I know these steam trains obviously had to stop periodically for water and
Well,
take
they
them
fed them-
through.
advertised
They,
them.
yeah, they fed them. They fed them small things on the train. I mean, they didn't get big meals or anything on the train because
there
they
were
were
no
going to the next stop.
refreshments.
I'm sure.
And actually, there was a television show. I'm gonna say that I do watch Lifetime. It was actually on Lifetime, and it had kind of the theme of an orphan train, and it told this young woman who was kind of Neve's age. Came, and they kind of, whether it was in church or whether it was on the town square or whether it was actually at the depot, they put the children out on display, and they lined them up, and the parents or the people came in, and whatever needs that they had, they would look at the children and they would ask them questions. We'll take him or we'll take her, and they would go and they would sign a piece of paper, and when they signed the piece of paper, they went with them, and that was it. That's the way.
And
Well, that's what astonishes me is
this
because
whole,
today, and I know very little about how to adopt, but I understand it's a long process. You
Oh,
have to
it
be
is.
screened
Yes.
and interviewed and make sure that you're going to be a
and
good
there are home visits where
Right,
people come
right,
to your
right.
house and
So this is-
check it out.
so
So
if-
what happened in this book, and on the orphan trains, I'm assuming, and we don't have that specific research information, or I don't, about the actual orphan trains, but it's very easy to get. All you have to do is go to
Yes.
websites that we have.
Yes, orphantraindepot.org.
Yeah.
Right.
Orphan Train.
Yeah.
And there's actually a map on that site that will show you where the train stopped and where children were adopted.
Wow.
And in this book, to the best of my memory, all of these viewings happened on the depot platform. So it was cold. They were out in the weather. They did not welcome them. It was kind of like indentured servants being put out to to be chosen from.
And,
Right.
if you were a baby,
chances
your
were better.
chances were better, because that's what mothers who couldn't have children had
Isn't that
wanted.
generally true of adoptions today, that little babies are adopted more often than, say, teenagers?
I would say that that's probably
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I don't have that.
I wonder why.
research, but I would
I wonder
too.
why Concordia, Kansas, is the site of this museum. Was it obviously it's out west somewhere? But
Well,
that's
it's
fascinating to
certainly
know.
the Midwest.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the Orphan Train went through there.
And that's where most of the children
Ended
went,
up
was through
in
the
that area.
Midwest and in that area. In the
But you
rural
know,
areas.
Paducah at one time was a pretty important rail center. A lot of different lines
Mm-hmm.
converged here, and I can kind of see why Paducah, in the middle of the country, like that. It'd be a fascinating project to go and delve through the newspapers to see if did they write news stories about this? Was it remarkable about when the Orphan Train was here? Did they interview people?
I think
What
it was even looked upon as a questionable practice, even during the time that it was happening. By
But there
many.
were no. But you had hundreds, thousands of children. What do you do?
that were homeless on the streets of New York.
So it was something that they felt that they needed to try to do to at least help some of those, some of the children. But, you speak of that, I have some people that I have met that actually their parents were on the orphan trains, which I'm hoping that we can do a second part to this show at one point, that maybe they can come on and tell those stories. But the train did stop, I believe, in Katie's, and the gentleman, the young woman, her father was on the orphan train. And there was a story about that in the newspaper, that I know that they talked about that the trains were in Katie's and that somebody stopped there and the children were there. And so it was around our area and around our region that children were here. And we have people in Paducah and surrounding areas that are some of those 1 in 25 that are connected to those orphan trains. Their parents, their grandparents rode the trains.
Right.
I'm seeing your signals over Tammy's
Yes.
shoulder.
We have about 30 seconds. Do you want to wrap something
We
up here
do.
quickly?
We do.
Yes.
We want to say that One Book, One Campus, One Community Read is brought about by WKCTC, and that right now you can get onto several websites, which we will show you, to find out how to become involved in a discussion group, when they meet, who leads them.
That she will be here
that she
March
will be here.
31st and April 1st of 2015. And we want everyone to read the book and then come out and meet Christina Baker Kline.
Right.
Well, thank you for being on the show. It's been a while since I've been here. I've come out of retirement briefly here.
Good.
And retirement's grand, by the way.
We hope you'll come out of retirement one more time to
One more
talk
time
to
to talk with the
you-
descendants of the
perhaps you
orphan
can
train.
prevail
Tammy
upon
has
me to
worked
do
really
that.
hard to make that
That's
happen, so we
wonderful.
want to see them on.
My guests today were Gail Robinson-Butler and Tammy Thompson. I'm Barry Craig. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again sometime.